Hi guys, my name's Dale and welcome to D&DGaming. If this is your first time visiting our channel, we provide honest, in-depth game reviews on a wide range of PC games and review them from the perspective of two experienced gamers. We highly recommend you click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our up-and-coming game reviews. If you find you like this review, remember to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button. With that said, in for review this time around is psychological horror In Sound Mind. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dav.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In Sound Mind is a story-driven first-person psychological horror game developed by We Create Stuff and published by Modus Games. The game was released in September 2021 and is available for Windows PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch. You play as Desmond Wales, initially awaking in the basement of a building. As you regain consciousness and work your way through the creepy, deserted building that's ever-changing in its form, you learn that Desmond works as a therapist, and it becomes apparent that a number of his patients have recently died. Whilst trying to piece together the circumstances surrounding the death of his patients, Desmond learns that they are inherently connected, as is his own story and sanity, to a mysterious experimental therapy. Is Desmond in sound mind? So Dale, what are your first impressions?
Well, I didn't really expect much going into this, as I don't recall hearing about the game when it was released, and so I just expected something quite average, to be honest. Luckily, it turned out to be way better than I expected.
Yeah, I'd not seen any reviews or footage of this game prior to playing, so I didn't really know what to expect. I realised it was from an indie developer, and I thought, it's likely a game I'll pick up and probably likely want to put down quite quickly, but thankfully I couldn't have been more wrong. So what were your general thoughts following playthrough?
Well, it gripped me right from the start, and after a couple of hours of playing it, I was really blown away by how good it was. As I said, I wasn't really expecting much, and my expectations for games is quite low these days, as I've played so many rubbish or just average games. But as I went through it, I kept finding myself saying, wow, this is an excellent game, and just really enjoying it. There's quite a few jump scares, but these aren't over the top or forced, and I thought they did a great job of keeping you on edge at times, but without constant fear of something about to happen. It is like a psychological horror game, effectively, although more on the psychological side, I'd say, than the pure horror side. But again, I thought they got a great balance of that.
Yeah, so I was really blown away by how good it was as well. It perfectly matches up a combination of psychological horror, role-playing adventure, and first-person shooter. As with all games, it has some issues which we'll go into shortly, but these for the most part don't ruin the experience of the game.
So in terms of graphic options, there's a decent range of options available, and I just ran it on default, which was mostly everything on high, but I was running at 1440p, and so I didn't want to ruin the performance by putting it any higher than the default. I'd also heard from numerous reviewers that the game can really hammer the graphics card at times and has caused some overheating issues for some. So I thought I'd better just keep it as default, but yeah, it ran well for me.
Yeah, I haven't really got anything to add to that. There's a few graphic options as pointed out, and you can tweak those in the graphics menu. I run the game on ultra settings, but then I have got a 1080p monitor, so it's probably a bit more forgiving on the graphics card.
And in terms of the graphics themselves and the graphic performance, yeah, as I say, it ran pretty well for me on the default settings. The FPS was high throughout. Didn't have any major frame drops or any other significant performance-related issues, but I did notice some stuttering in places. The graphics themselves looked okay, nothing spectacular, and a bit washed out in places, to be honest, but I can't say it really bothered me, as they were perfectly good enough, and the gameplay was gripping enough that I didn't really take too much notice of the finer graphics details.
Yeah, so we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but the game ran really well on my PC, like shit off a shovel really, no problems at all on the highest graphic settings. I have heard reports it didn't quite run so well on PlayStation, but on PC it was nothing short of perfect graphics performance for me. The graphics themselves are okay. They're nothing special, but this isn't much of a surprise being an indie game. They tend to be some way behind the AAA titles with graphics and can look quite dated, of which this does, but it doesn't ruin the experience of the game. Some of the items in the game felt a bit asset flippy. For those who don't know what I mean, this is where developers buy assets to put in games such as trees, rocks, or can be anything really that they've bought off something like the Unreal or Unity game engine stores. And then the developer creates and sells the game using those assets rather than creating the assets from scratch. I could be wrong, but some of them felt a bit that way, especially as the game has been created using the Unity engine. It's not a problem if they are bought assets, but it's just something I noticed. So in terms of player controls, the game controls are quite simple. On PC, it's the usual first-person controls, with SAD to move around, space to jump, control to crouch, E to interact, usual stuff really. So nothing new there and fairly basic. Key rebindings are available in the games menu as well.
Yeah, it's really just the usual first-person shooter type controls, so nothing much to talk about there.
So in terms of game story, you play as Desmond Wales, a therapist waking suddenly in a building basement in the town of Milton Haven, a town largely submerged by water. As you explore, you find the building to be a strange, ever-changing, dreamlike environment, with doors leading to a variety of locations, but with one door to a familiar place, Desmond's office. Finding tapes of 4 of Desmond's patients, you use these to gain access into the psyche of these patients and begin to piece together the circumstances surrounding their deaths, the connection between them, and who might be ultimately responsible for those deaths, whilst trying to maintain your own in-sound mind.
So in terms of the general game mechanics, you explore the environments in a relatively linear fashion, with the story driving the way in which you go, even in the larger, more open environments. You find tapes of previous patients that can be played in a tape player in Desmond's office. Upon playing a tape, this creates a change in the environment that leads to a bright light appearing in the office door, which in turn leads to a dreamlike environment. In this environment, you find tape players laid out along a linear route and listen to the tapes of the sessions that the patient had with Desmond. The route leads to another door, which is access into the dreamlike psyche of the patient. You explore the levels, finding clues, solving puzzles, and defeating enemies. The levels are quite long, in which you frequently find yourself doubling back into the same areas, but sometimes with changes to the environments after completing tasks. There's one boss to defeat in each level, essentially representations of the patients themselves, and these are very varied, from such as a ghost-like figure on one level to a raging mechanical ball vehicle thing on another level. Once you complete the puzzles and defeat the boss in any given level, a door appears that goes back into the previous linear environment, and after playing another set of tapes, you get back to your office.
So in terms of UI, the UI is very basic, but all you need really. Health indicator is the bottom left, and the stamina bar also appears here when running. Indicators relating to inventory items such as ammo and torch battery appear in the bottom right. Tasks appear in the top left when you get assigned them and promptly disappear. However, you can reread the tasks in the inventory menu. The inventory system itself is also basic, but all you need really. You press tab to open it, select an item by highlighting it, and press E to use or tab again to exit.
Yeah, it's a fairly minimal UI, but I liked it actually. It had everything I needed to see and was just unobtrusive really.
So in terms of sound and music, I found the music was really good in this actually. It's really quite varied and works very well for the horror style game that it is. It's also all recorded from one band called The Living Tombstone. The voice acting was pretty good. It was quite convincing and I thought it was really well voiced.
It's unbearable, isn't it? The pain of losing a patient. Virginia trusted you and she died because of it. What will you achieve by listening to her tape? Vindication, absolution, retribution for your misdeeds? Think about it.
The same voice actor plays Desmond as well as another character, of which I won't mention his name as it's a bit of a spoiler, but both parts are played really well, I felt. The environment sounds really good and it makes for a classic look over your shoulder, what's that noise, shit your pants jump scary type game.
Certainly has suitably creepy background music, which sets the scene and which ramps up when you're in danger or fighting enemies. As is usual with this type of game, you can often tell when something's going to happen by what the music's doing, although it's not always the case and definitely catches you off guard at times. I thought the voice acting was great and it really added to the immersion of this for me.
It's just sad, you know? It's not fair. I've been getting food and stuff from Eden's Grove for like my whole life. They expect me to just be okay with them ruining this town and forcing me to shop at their place? This makes me really sad. Am I crazy? I am crazy, right?
No. Changes like these can be uncomfortable. Eden's Grove was certainly a staple of the community.
So did you come across any bugs or glitches in the game?
No, I didn't notice any major bugs or glitches in my playthrough, although I'm not sure the game is particularly well optimised in general, as I did notice some stuttering in places.
Yeah, so for me, I did come across one bug in the game where I was meant to collect a bunch of fuses to put in a generator to open a gate. But as I walked out of the generator room, it said that I'd collected all the fuses already and the gate just started to open. So it was really random and a bit disappointing, really, as I didn't actually get to go and do the task. So it was a bit strange. So to sum up, things I liked about the game, it's really quite unique. I can't say I've played any horror game that's like it. The psychological, dreamlike element means they can really run wild with the level designs and representations of the patients in the levels, the bosses basically. The story really is great. It's really clearly been thought through. It grips you as you explore the psyche of the patients and really drives the game with its psychological narrative. It's quite an intense game. There's a lot of jump scares, and so you're frequently on edge, half expecting to shit your pants when something jumps out at you. You do have to search for items to find them. They don't flash in your face like some games, and they're only visible with a white icon when you get right up close to them. This prompts you to look around and explore your environment, as all games should do. Far too many games now have flashing in-your-face items that require no actual searching and present no challenge. I'm glad to report this game isn't like that. The puzzles were challenging, but without being annoying. They provided enough of a challenge to make you think and scan your environment, but without being too hard and dragging them out in length or complexity. It had a balanced level of difficulty that ramped up as the game went on. It wasn't too hard or too easy, but increased suitably well as the game went on. For me, it was about the perfect amount of horror in the game. I've noticed some reviews since I played it say that it's not got enough horror in it and it just turns into an FPS. I kind of agree with this, as the scary parts are probably more confined to the first half of the game, so I guess for major horror game fans it might not be scary enough. But for me it was suitably scary. However, saying that, jump scares do continue throughout the game.
In terms of things I liked about it, kept me gripped throughout with an interesting story and creepy psychological horror vibes. I thought it was excellent level design and environments. Although there are several very long levels, the actual design was just great, I thought. It's a very atmospheric game, and they really add to the psychological horror feel with the music and background and enemy sounds. The boss fights are well designed. I like how they basically tormented you throughout the level before you finally got to face them. They're all very different, and you had to work out how to kill them, usually using the environments around you rather than simply running and taking them heads on with a gun. The puzzle elements were tricky, but not too challenging. I did consult an online guide a couple of times, but that's mostly because I just got impatient.
So in terms of things I didn't like, mainly nitpicking things really, but the levels are very long, maybe a bit too long, and on all of them you have to double back on yourself multiple times as the levels sometimes change slightly as you complete tasks. In one way this is great, as the changing environment is quite reflective of a dreamlike psyche of a patient in therapy. However, the length of them does drag on a bit at times. You can't interact with very much other than typical inventory items such as health and ammo, and this does make it feel a bit like it's on rails even when in larger, more open environments. There could have been a few more weapon types. You mainly find yourself with the pistol and it gets a bit repetitive just using this all the time. Mid-game you do get a shotgun, and you also use pills as weapons later on in the game, which was quite an interesting point, but still I found myself with the pistol most of the time. There are a few weird things that don't appear to have been thought through particularly well, such as using a shard of glass repeatedly throughout the game to break wooden planks nailed across doors and doorways. I think a crowbar would have been more realistic here. The main enemies are these kind of robotic alien looking things, which I didn't feel suited the narrative of the game very well. They were the same in all the levels, and they just became a bit more of an annoyance than anything else as the game went on.
Yeah, in terms of things I didn't like, as Dav mentioned, they are long levels and it did take it out of me at times. You really got to prepare yourself, sit down knowing that it's going to be a long playthrough. They did kind of make the game feel longer than it actually was as well, I found. So My playthrough was about 15 hours according to the Epic Games Store, but it definitely felt more like a 20+ hour game. Although I did get every collectible before exiting the level, so that probably added a fair bit extra time to each level. I didn't really like the fact that once you enter a tape level, you can't exit it again until you beat it. So you can't just come and go, back between the main area as you please. You're kind of committed to the level once you go into it. Some of the enemies I found were a bit of a bullet sponge, and it felt like the hits weren't really doing anything to some of them. I wasn't too keen on the save system, as you can't manually save and have to wait for the auto-save icon to show before you know it's safe to quit. This can be frustrating when you've got a long level, as we said, and you just want to finish that session, but you have to wait for the auto-save to show before you can actually quit. So did you think there was any missed opportunities in this one?
I thought it was a shame you couldn't hold the torch at the same time as the pistol or other single-handed weapons, especially as Desmond has two hands. The game is very dark for the most part, and constantly switching back and forth between the torch and the weapons as you wander around, and the darkness did get a bit much over the course of the game. With health items, you can either use them as you pick them up, or if you need health, or if you're not able to pick them up, it's because your health is full. I would like to have been able to store health items in the inventory for use when in fights with enemies later on, rather than getting really low on health and frantically running around trying to find some health on the floor when it gets low.
Yeah, I feel that perhaps an overlay map would be useful, or a map that you can go into inventory to look at. As the game is, you have a fixed map in certain parts of a level that you can refer to if you need to get your bearings, but there's normally only a few of these maps dotted about the levels. I mean, really though, this didn't cause a major issue for me, but yeah, I did feel it was a slight missed opportunity.
So in terms of scores, what do you think on this one, Dale?
But I really enjoyed this game, and it's one of the best I've played in a long time, to be honest. It has a few minor issues and could be better optimised, but it really kept me gripped throughout, and I got really immersed in it. I feel that it hasn't got the mainstream recognition it deserves, and definitely seems to be an underrated game. I hope they make a sequel which addresses some of the issues in this, and that could be a truly outstanding game. As it stands, this is still an excellent game and well worth a playthrough, and so it's an 8.5 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, so for me, I found this to be unexpectedly awesome game that really blew me away, especially coming from an indie developer that I've not heard of. The combination of unique psychological horror style game with a gripping and well portrayed story and some interesting and unique mechanics made for an incredibly enjoyable game. It's not perfect, I did have some minor gripes, however these could easily be addressed in a sequel to this game, so for this one it's a very respectable 8.5 out of 10 from me.
Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.